Today we are going to look at about the cheapest wagon you can get. This is the Hornby 21-ton coal wagon. It's based on, I understand, a Great Western Railway steel-bodied wagon built in the 1930s, I think 1932. No doubt somebody will correct me on that if I'm wrong. This particular version is in the livery of the National Coal Board, which took over Britain's collieries in 1947 and was wound up in 1987. I don't know if this particular wagon is prototypical, but in real life the NCB used a whole hodgepodge of different wagons, often acquired from the main line companies, so it may not be totally authentic, but it is not implausible. Now, this model dates back to the early 1970s. Hornby of that era is kind of like the contestants on Love Island. Great body, not much going on underneath. So it is here. The body is a decent moulding, but the chassis is very basic. Some people actually like to swap the chassis out with a kit-built one. These wagons they're kind of Hornby's go-to low-budget wagons. They released them in the railroad range as part of the short-lived and very garish Station Master range, and they've been in countless train sets. So you can get them absolutely dirt cheap. This particular one was £2 from a toy fair, and I don't think I've ever seen a second-hand one for more than £4. Now, as you know, what I like to do with a cheap wagon is see how it can be improved with a bit of painting and weathering. Now, my last few projects have been wooden wagons, but this is a steel wagon, so we need to think differently. So normally I like to start out by painting the chassis in weathered black. I'm not going to do that this time because the whole thing is black. And I don't really want to have to repaint the entire body and, potentially lose these markings. So all I'm going to do to the chassis is pick out the ends of the brake levers in white. And it's interesting, it only seems to have been relatively recently that Hornby have been able to decorate wagon chassis. So this is just a way of making it stand out from other wagons of the 70s there. What I am going to do is paint the interior of the wagon rusty brown. No, rusty brown. Sounds like some sort of blues musician. I'm using various different shades here. Not trying to get them remotely neat. So I think I've said before, one of the things about coal is that it's quite corrosive. It's very unlikely that a wagon like this would stay painted for long, if it was ever painted, which, to be honest, I don't think it would be. That is fully covered. As you can see, I've gone for a totally uneven, blobby, messy coating. I want it to look like, the way rust really does. It's a whole variety of shades. So I wanted it to look as interesting as possible. Now, that's going to take a little while to dry. And in the meantime, I'm going to sort of work a little bit on the weathering of the outside. And I'm going to use a technique that you may recall from my video on the subject of triangular wagons, which is that I'm going to add lots of rust like this. I'm going to go very crude indeed. And then, when it's dry, a stunning transformation will occur. And this is the end result. So, as you can see, I've sort of scraped it away. In some places I've left the sort of rust fairly intact. Some places, almost by happy accident, I've sort of slightly scored the plastic, which only adds to the kind of beaten upness of it. Alright, next stage we are going to go into watercolours. The watercolour I'm using specifically is Burnt Umber. And this is actually a very cheap watercolour. You don't need to splash out on fancy artists' watercolours. I'm just going to daub it on again fairly thickly. And then dilute as I go. What I really want is that streaky effect. Do you know the one? Do you know the sort of thing I mean, where you like get rust, kind of. You get trails of rust left by rain and that sort of thing. Going to add a bit on the chassis as well. Don't really want the chassis to be too rusty, because obviously this wagon is supposed to still be in revenue earning service. So, you have to know it's not all going to fall to bits. Now I want to add a wash of black on the interior, except the rust coat is still drying. So, alright, it's taken about 37 years, but I think it's basically dry. At least dry enough to get started. So yeah, I am using a black based wash to make this look like it's got layers and layers and layers of coal dust. I'm not going to add it on the outside, because one of the disadvantages of watercolours is that when they dry, they will, even after they dry, you can reactivate them by adding more water. But that's okay. I have a plan. So if you watch my videos on a regular basis, I'm sure you have a pretty decent idea of what's coming now. Oh, I did finish the interior, by the way. There it is, just waiting to dry. But the exterior is already dry, so what I'm going to do is I am going to take this eyeshadow palette, get some black eyeshadow, and I'm going to use it to dust my wagon up. There we go. Another thing about this wagon, with its factory finish is that it's moulded in black plastic, which, the funny thing about plastic, the thing no one could possibly have predicted, is that it looks kind of plasticky. So this is a way of getting rid of that shine. As well as making it look authentically dirty. The illusion is complete. I think that looks okay, especially for £2. I mean, you really can't go far wrong there. It's as you can see, it's a bit of a beast compared to, oops, derailment. It's a bit of a beast compared to the other wagons I've done, but it's rugged, it's fairly indestructible, and it adds a little bit of variety to a goods train. So, give it a thought, and I will see you soon for another video. Cheerio.